Good morning. We're just starting to record the session. I'm Teresa Mueller, and just a little bit about this presentation will be given to you from Ahmed. He's going to give the presenters, but I wanted to let everyone know that we are recording now and that we will have the presenters go first. We have a small enough group that, feel free to ask questions, put them in the chat, etc. And then when the presentations are done, we will have a networking session and we will stop recording at that point. And you can also advertise any needs and wants if you have a listing or a development or something that you want to talk about. That would be great. So I'm going to hand it over to Ahmed, and he will introduce our speakers. Feel free to put your contact information into the chat. The chat is savable, and feel free also to ask questions there. Raise your hand, and thank you everyone for coming. So Ahmed, if you want to go ahead and introduce our first presenter and give a little bit of background.
Thank you, Teresa. My name is Ahmed Haddad. I'm the chair, actually the outgoing chair. Teresa is going to be taking over this role after this meeting. So you will have any complaints, call Teresa, not me, please.
I'll have you take care of them afterwards.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for signing up for this event. We're really excited. I saw, Antonio at a presentation he did for a CRPS program during the break for the San Diego Association of Realtors. And I was doing my audit, so I said, my God, this is great resource. Somebody who practices both in the United States and in Mexico. They have offices in both these places. So, I reached out, and he was generous enough to give us his time and to talk about the cross-border transactions from a legal perspective. So a little bit about Antonio. Antonio Maldonado is an attorney licensed to practice in the United States and in Mexico, and in two of the most largest states and probably the most difficult bar exams to get in New York and in California. He is bilingual in English and Spanish with complete fluency in the legal systems of both the United States and Canada and in Mexico, under licensure from the Institute of Technology in Monterrey, Mexico, a master's law degree from American University, Washington College of Law in Washington, D.C., recognized by regional publications in Southern California as one of the best attorneys in the areas of international law and business law, and he's been rated superb 10 out of 10 by ABO. He has many times served as an expert witness on Mexican law in U.S. litigation matters in both state and federal court, having been a court-appointed expert on Mexican law by the Supreme Court of California in Los Angeles County. He's a member of the American Bar Association section of international law, having served as vice chair of its Mexico committee and as a co-chair of its San Diego Tijuana city chapter. He's also an active member of the San Diego County Bar Association and have served in several leadership positions within the international law section for multiple years, including as its chair. He's also a member of the board of directors and barrister member of the Honorable William N. Wright Inn of Court, an American Inn of Court based in San Diego, California. And there's much more, but I'm going to stop there. And Antonio, thank you very much. Unmute yourself, and it's all yours.
Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you very much for that very nice and thorough introduction. And so what I'll do right now is I will just get to the content. I will be sharing with you a couple of slides that I put together on PowerPoint, and I think I've managed to make it so that I can share those images not as PDFs, but from the window directly. So bear with me a second. Okay. So the first question I often get by clients that do not know about Mexico and investing in real estate is, can a foreign investor buy in Mexico? And the answer to that question is yes, but there are some caveats. So in Mexico, under the Mexican Constitution, there is a restriction on foreign ownership of real estate that is within 60 miles from the border or 30 miles from the coastline. There is no restriction if the property is bought within the interior of Mexico, but a permit from the Mexican federal government is required. So when a purchase is made from within this restricted zone, what is many times set up by foreign purchasers is a Mexican trust or fideicomiso. You'll be hearing that term throughout this presentation. Now, when a fideicomiso is not set up, a property could also be purchased through a Mexican business entity. Foreign investors can form a Mexican business entity, and this can then be the purchaser, the vehicle through which real estate is purchased. Now, many times when residential real estate is purchased, and the shareholders of the entity want to use it for personal use, there can be some issues, especially in connection with taxes. It's usually best to have lease agreements with arm's length terms and so forth to avoid issues with taxation. But in the interior of Mexico, it is possible for a non-Mexican citizen to directly buy property just after getting that government permit that I was telling you about. Now, many times when real estate is purchased in Mexico, even if done in the interior of Mexico, it can be a good idea to do so through a business entity, just like you would buy investment property, commercial property here in the US. So then let's talk about what is a fideicomiso. And I'm going to be talking about the business entities in Mexico shortly as well. So what is a fideicomiso? It's a trust. It's essentially what it is. It's created at the time of the closing of the purchase of the real property. The settlor of the trust is the seller, and the trustee that takes title to the property is a Mexican bank, and the buyer becomes the beneficiary of the fideicomiso. Now, the beneficiary can be either an individual or a business entity. Many times it is a good idea to set it up so that it is a business entity. Many times when it's a US-based buyer, US-based investor, you want to have a US-based business entity that can form part of the investor's estate planning, and therefore at their death, instead of having a successor beneficiary take outside of probate through the terms of the trust, you have the entity continue being the beneficiary, and that entity's ownership is what's included within the estate planning in the US, and it avoids taxes in Mexico that apply at transfer of death. Many times people don't know about that transfer of death that applies to non-residents, which is taxed at a 25% rate. There are some limitations as to what can be done with the fideicomiso. The owner directly is a Mexican bank. There is an annual trustee fee. These trusts are set up with a 50-year term. They can be renewed. They can be transferred over to another trustee. The trustee bank can be instructed to sell the property, mortgage the property, etc. But you always have that additional step of giving instructions to the trustee so that the trustee, the bank, can perform those activities. And of course, they will be charging the owner, the beneficiary, every time they do anything. And some banks in Mexico are very slow. Some are not that bad, but some are just terrible. So let's talk about this Mexican business entities. There are typically two types of business entities that are used. The first one is the one that's similar to a corporation or a sociedad anónima. It's acronyms, or its initials are the CV because it's a variable capital. They can be without variable capital, but there are very few and far between that do not have variable capital. There are also LLCs or SRLs. LLCs in Mexico have a certain benefit when they are owned by a US taxpayer, and that is that the US owner can choose how this foreign entity will be treated for US income tax purposes. You can do an 8832 entity election and choose whether it's going to be treated as a disregarded entity, whether it's going to be treated as a partnership or as a foreign corporation. Each of these, either the Mexican corporation or the Mexican LLC, need to have at least 2 shareholders or members. It cannot have one. If it does have one, then that triggers dissolution. A corporation either has a single administrator or board of administration, similar to a board of directors. And then a Mexican LLCs has either one manager or multiple managers. Powers of attorney. Many times, Mexico entities grant powers of attorney to individuals that act on behalf of the business entity. There are significant differences between agency law in the United States and agency law in Mexico. There are no ostensible agents, apparent agents under Mexican law. Somebody, in order to bind their principal, they need to have a power of attorney, or they need to have authority under the terms of the charter of a corporation. Choosing the right type of business entity. Well, as I said, there are certain tax advantages for US taxpayers to form Mexican LLCs instead of Mexican corporations. Mexican corporations are specifically named in the Internal Revenue Code as a corporation type. And so there's only one way for it to be treated. The Mexican LLC, you can choose how it's going to be treated, and you can treat it as a disregarded entity to the extent that the right structure is in place. And so let's look at a typical holding structure that has a Mexico entity. So down here you see on the right lower corner a house and an industrial factory that represents the real estate. And up here, you see a blue oval that has an investor. And for purposes of this presentation, we'll consider that as an LLC. And usually, what is done is you would have the US LLC or the investor form a Mexico LLC, and then you would have a single member US LLC be considered as a disregarded entity for US tax purposes. And then those 2 entities would be the 2 shareholders or the 2 members to the Mexico LLC. And then because of how that's set up, you can then have that Mexico LLC treated as either a disregarded entity or as a corporation, whatever makes the most sense to the investor. Many times it is a better idea to set it up as a disregarded entity, and then the Mexico properties can go on your Schedule E if that's the way that the investor is setting up their holdings for tax purposes in the US. Now, the typical holding structure with the fideicomiso is for the US investor to, at the time of purchase, to form a fideicomiso through a Mexican bank. And the Mexican bank is the nominal owner of the real estate, and it is through that agreement, through that declaration of trust, that the investor, either through an LLC or directly, becomes a beneficiary of the Mexican trust. Now, this question often comes up. There's already a property in Mexico. It's titled within an existing fideicomiso. Can I purchase the fideicomiso itself, the beneficiary interest to that? And the answer is yes, you could do that. Now, if the property is titled in a Mexican corporation, can the foreign buyer purchase the Mexican corporation? Yes, of course, that is possible as well. And can I purchase the underlying real estate? Yes, but if you do purchase the real estate directly, it would have to be either through a Mexican entity, a new one set up by yourself, or with a trust. And so those are the three ways that you could structure a purchase. Now, if you're buying a foreign entity, a U.S. entity, as the holder of Mexican real estate, you could do the transaction in the U.S. and have U.S. tax implications, and possibly avoid certain tax implications in Mexico, since it may qualify as a transfer that does not involve Mexico real estate directly. And so what is the process of the purchase of real estate in Mexico? So let's talk about these steps. The very first step, when somebody through a broker finds property, they typically submit an offer that's accepted by a seller, and this can take the form of a letter of intent or a non-binding offer. Many times, even if these offers are prepared intending to be binding, many times they're drafted in such a way that they're not binding. And many times you do not want them to be binding because they do not contain the full terms of how this transaction is going to be together. Many times you want to have the flexibility of structuring the transaction correctly, but you just want to have a basic understanding between the potential buyer and the potential seller as to what the sales price will be and what other very basic terms, commercial terms, are being agreed to by the parties. Then the purchase agreement comes into being. In Mexico, there are no standard purchase agreements. Here in California, the California Association of Realtors has a form, a model purchase sale agreement that is used for the purchase of all residential real property of 1 to 4 units. And that's what's typically done here in California. In Mexico, there is no equivalent. Every purchase agreement is set up, drafted by itself. Sometimes, other prior agreements are used, but be aware that there is no standard form. You want the purchase agreement to reflect the particular terms of the transaction that you're going to be getting into, or the investor is going to be getting into. Escrow, and it has a question mark there. Well, there are companies that offer escrow services in Mexico. However, escrow, the concept of escrow is not particularly regulated as a separate business in Mexico, and so you will not find laws in Mexico that require an escrow company to have bonding or insurance. And so many times U.S. buyers prefer to hire a U.S.-based escrow that offers services for transactions in Mexico as an escrow for these Mexico transactions. Do Mexico purchasers or Mexico-based purchasers use escrow? Many times they don't. Many times they enter into agreements where they pay a small deposit to the seller, maybe 5–10%, and then the balance is going to be paid at the time of closing. And so their escrow is not used in those situations. But is it a good idea to have escrow? Definitely, I think it is. Conditions, you can certainly include conditions within purchase agreements. Sometimes they do not include them. And I don't understand why it is that many times attorneys in Mexico fail to include conditions. Now, one of the main conditions that should be included is doing due diligence on title, making sure that the seller is in fact the owner of the property, that there are no encumbrances, that there are no liens on the property, that there is no deed recorded outside of the chain of title. It really is it is not easy to do a proper due diligence on Mexico real estate because of the of how public registries, the county recorder's office, they were the equivalent of a county recorder's offices, are sometimes organized. Sometimes they're very organized. They have their records in a computerized database with the deeds scanned, but there are others that are still paper-based that have only an index on a computer file, and it makes it very, very difficult to find anything. Inspections should also be a condition, especially when you're buying commercial investment property, industrial property. Sometimes if it is going to be used for industrial purposes and it's not in areas that are used for residential areas, we may even want to have environmental inspections done on any environmental contamination on the properties with a phase 1 or maybe a phase 2 environmental study. So appraisals are always required in connection with real estate transactions in Mexico. They will be used by the Mexican notary public to determine what taxes will be owed by the parties. Of course, the sales prices are important, but the appraisal value is also going to be taken into account within calculations into either the higher of the appraisal price or the purchase price is going to be used to calculate the buyer's transfer tax and to determine whether the buyer, if the price is so much below appraisal, then the buyer may have to pay a tax for the ghost income that the buyer is receiving for the value that is below a certain amount below the appraisal and the purchase price. Closing of a real estate transaction in Mexico, and here I'm talking about the purchase of either beneficiary rights under a Mexican real estate trust, a fideicomiso, or the purchase of the real estate itself. When you have a transaction for the purchase of a business entity, then you do not necessarily have to close before a Mexican notary public. I want to make that distinction. But when you are purchasing an interest in Mexico, you do need to appear with a notary public. They have to be hired months in advance. If you're forming a business entity, they will be preparing all of those documents. Those are going to be recorded in the notary public's books. Now, a notary public in Mexico is an attorney. It's an attorney that has a specific designation by the state government. They have this authority to legalize or to authorize transactions of real estate and other types of transactions. And they also act as a withholding agent for local government taxes, such as the transfer tax, as well as for the federal government for the capital gains tax that applies in Mexico. Now, if this is the sale by a Mexican corporation that is selling the real estate as part of its inventory, then there wouldn't be a capital gain tax. It would be an income tax that would be paid by that selling Mexico entity. But if the company is not in the business of buying real estate and selling it as inventory, but rather it has purchased it for investment purposes, that then a different tax rate is going to apply, and that's a 35% tax rate. If the seller is a non-resident, then you can have either the capital gains of 35% on the net gain. And here's a very important thing: that capital gains tax in Mexico is calculated differently than how it is calculated here in the U.S. In Mexico, it is adjusted based on inflation. And let me stop sharing the screen. Not sure how to. Okay, I think I stopped sharing my screen. So in capital gains taxes in Mexico are calculated differently. The purchase basis is adjusted based on inflation. Here in the US, we don't have that. And the way that a non-resident seller is going to be taxed is either on the 35% of the net gain or a straight 35% on the sales price. And that's going to be, similar to how we have a withholding here in the US, FERPTA, a straight amount that's withheld from the foreign seller. And so it's similar in that way in Mexico. And, I've tried to do this very quick survey on the process of buying real estate in Mexico. We represent clients in the purchase of real estate, many times commercial and investment, along the Tijuana, San Diego area. There's a lot of industry that goes on here at the border with maquiladoras and other types of manufacturing. And we've helped developers and others buy and develop real estate in other parts of Mexico, such as in Los Cabos and in the Bahía de Banderas area in the states of Jalisco and Nayarit. And I think that, having talked about these very key areas about how transactions can occur in Mexico, either with business entities or directly, can give you a better idea as brokers as to what the landscape is when you are advising an investor, whether to buy an existing entity, whether to buy the real estate directly. If they're going to do that, they'll have to form their own entity or buy it through a fideicomiso. To the extent that there are questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Antonio. I did notice in the chat there were a few questions. I'm going to call them out if they feel that their questions were adequately answered. Peter and Paul. Peter had asked about if the business entity needed to have Mexican citizens involved. And then Paul asked about the timing of the notary when it's required. Okay,
great. Yeah, great questions. Well, let me address the first question. The first question is whether a Mexican business entity needs to have Mexican citizens as shareholders. And under Mexican law, there are some foreign investment restrictions in certain industries. As an example, an industry that has limitations is transportation. If you form a business entity that is going to be providing transportation services within Mexico, then at least more than 50% of the ownership needs to be of Mexican citizenship. However, purchase of real estate is not an activity that has any foreign investment restrictions. And so if a business entity is set up specifically for the purchase of real estate, and you essentially set this up as a single purpose vehicle to buy real estate, then you will have no requirement to have a Mexican national be part shareholder.
Okay.
And now, in connection with the second question, what's the timing when you have a transaction in Mexico? Well, it will depend. It will depend very much on how you structure this transaction. If you structure the transaction as the purchase of an existing business entity, then the main driver of how long this will take is going to be how long it will take for the buyer to do the due diligence in connection with the status of the business entity, the shares of the business entity that they're going to be buying. If they are buying the rights to an existing fideicomiso, then it's going to be relatively quick, because a Mexican trust, a fideicomiso, does not have to be set up. Getting a permit from the Mexican federal government to set up a Mexican trust is going to take 3 to 5 weeks. And between preparing the agreements and getting everything in line so that you can close with the notary public in connection with new bank trust, that's probably going to take between 2 and 3 months. If you purchase an existing fideicomiso, then it's a much quicker process. It's possible to do so between 3 and 6 weeks. So I hope that gives a better idea of how long it takes to set this up. And now I also want to tell you that if you have already set up a Mexican business entity and you go through the process of buying the property, and not take into account the time to waive contingencies or to meet the conditions in the purchase agreement, you can close probably within 2 weeks or maybe even less. Closing through by a Mexican purchaser, Mexican individual, or a Mexican business entity can be very quick, especially when things have been set up correctly.
Thanks, Antonio. 2 more questions, and then we'll let Ed present. In terms of who pays for the appraisal, the buyer or seller, and then probably the favorite question of all brokers is, how does a U.S. broker get paid on a Mexican deal?
Great questions. Well, the first one, who pays the appraisal? Well, typically, closing costs in Mexico are typically paid by the buyer, such as the appraisal, because the seller is going to be paying the whatever trust fees for their existing trusts to terminate and to transfer title. They're going to be paying for the for a certificate of no liens. They're going to be paying their capital gains taxes and the broker's fees. The buyer is typically going to be paying all of the other closing expenses. But of course, this is something that can be negotiated within the terms of the purchase agreement. And if the parties agree that the seller is going to pay it, then that's the agreement. But it is typically paid by the buyer. Now, in terms of how does a broker get paid? Well, that's a great question, because it has to be through the agreements that are entered into. And so it is, especially if you're the broker that is representing the buyer of real estate, you as the broker want to have an agreement with your buyer that he is going to get an agreement from the seller of the real estate so that you get paid your fees, whether that's 1/2 of the total real estate commission, or whether you enter into an agreement with the seller's broker. That is going to be based on how you set the transaction up. You see, here in San Diego, at least, when you become a member to the MLS, you agree that whatever commission agreement that you reach with the owner of the property, you will be sharing 1/2 of that with the buyer's broker. That's part of the contract that you are bound to when you become a member of the MLS. When you're getting involved in transactions in Mexico, many times there is not going to be an MLS like that. You're not going to be a member of that MLS. There is not going to be any obligation by the seller's broker to split the commission with you. And so what you want to do as the buyer's broker is to enter into an agreement with your buyer so that as part of the terms of the purchase agreement, that the seller's listing agent, listing broker, shares their commission with you.
Thank you very much, Antonio. So we're going to segue into Ed presenting next. And Ed Eakin, he's our special guest and has a lot of involvement in selling real estate in Mexico as well. So his resume is really long. It would take me the entire Zoom to go over all of his credentials. But he did start out as a home builder and has been selling real estate for as a real estate agent for the last decade and a half, both in the US and Mexico. So he has experience working with the developers, and I say that he's all parts of all the food chain, knowing the developers and selling properties to people in the US, as well as in his own home state of Texas. So I'm going to hand it over to Ed. And by the way, Ed soon will be in San Diego with me. So hopefully if any of you are on the call heading out to San Diego, you'll have a chance to meet us live in San Diego. So Ed, if you could go ahead and start, and when you're ready for me to play the video, I'm happy to do that.
Great. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Ahmed, and thank you, Teresa, for inviting me to come and kind of share my story along with my passion about real estate in Mexico, and really the process to take all the things that Antonio shared with us today and tell you how you work within those as a U.S. broker, okay, or realtor, either way. So I'm located here in Dallas, Texas. We have a small brokerage here that we're based in Dallas, and we serve across the state of Texas. And then we work a ton in Mexico and in Belize and wherever there's a pretty beach. So kind of like to tell you that my real estate story started in Mexico. I was, after a long career as a home builder, I had an opportunity to move down to Playa del Carmen, and I was placed on what Discovery Channel voted in 2007 the prettiest beach in the world, which was Maroma Beach. And I was there working for a developer running a sales team. So my real estate career started there, spent a couple years there. And at that time, there were no licenses for realtors. If you had a phone, you could be a realtor. If you had a car, that was a bonus to have as a realtor. So after spending a couple years, I came back to Texas and got my real estate license. And it wasn't very long. I decided that I really missed selling beach properties in Mexico, and how was I going to get involved, and how was I going to learn how to do that from the U.S. And you know, I started off locally at our association here in Dallas. We really had a small global committee I got really involved with, and then before I knew it, I was part of the global committee at the Houston Association of Realtors, where I was the chair of that global committee last year. And then I was a member of, got on the Austin Board of Realtors, where I serve as a global ambassador for Central America. And then also I participate on Texas Realtor Association's global committee. And I share that because that's how I really got in, and that's how I started to really learn, you know, how real estate worked for investors here in the United States to go purchase in Mexico. And from that, you know, I had met a realtor that had their CIPS. Well, I'm sure most of y'all know what CIPS is, but for those that don't, it's Certified International Property Specialist. It's a designation that you earn 5-day class from NAR. And I've had mine since probably 2014. And currently last year, I was asked to be an NAR CIPS mentor. So helping you agents take that designation and use it to grow their global real estate adventure. So let's go to Mexico. AMPI. I just got back from the AMPI conference last week in Tampico, Mexico. It was, they call it actually a Congreso. It was my 4th Congreso to attend, and always fun to get back and network with, you know, the best realtors across Mexico, and hang out and talk and have discussions with the president of AMPI this year, which is Pedro. They're so excited about building relationships with U.S. realtors. I mean, they know we're their biggest investor all over Mexico. The U.S. buys Mexico. So going and getting involved, being a member of AMPI, going to their congressos, going and visiting the different AMPI sections throughout Mexico has been huge for me, especially in the Riviera Maya. And we'll talk a little bit more about the Riviera Maya in a moment. So just getting involved, you know, in AMPI, and then you take it to the NAR conference this week in San Diego, which I'll be flying out in about 2 hours. It's just a great way to go, and there will be realtors from Mexico there that are coming to the States to come network with us and come sharing what, commercial opportunities they have. They come share all the cool things and that they are so excited about Mexico. Okay. Let's go on to the processes that Antonio talked about. Part of what has made me successful through really all of my networking, all my involvement on committees and associations has really been key with the partners that I have met and brought on kind of to surround myself. I can't tell you, in dealing in Mexico or Belize or any other country, how important it is to have the right partners, around you. That's going to protect you as a broker / realtor. It's going to protect your clients, which is key in dealing with real estate in other countries. And they have processes. Some of the processes are like the U.S., and then other processes aren't so much like the U.S. Like Antonio said, some of them are very good record keeping, and then in certain areas, it's not so good, and it's hard and difficult to find information. It's not like here where you can go on a computer and be a couple clicks away, and all of a sudden you have the right answers. So when I say partners, first thing I always, whether it be a commercial opportunity or a residential opportunity, I'm really trying to connect with the CIPS in the area. Okay. They're trained like we are trained here. They go through the same classes that we go. They're working under the same code of ethics, which are all good things when it comes to protecting our clients. So, that's the first thing, I share with other realtors when you're doing business in Mexico is, man, look up, go to the CIPS directory and find you some CIPSs in the area. There's a bunch of them across Mexico, especially in Baja, Mexico. That's probably where most of your CIPS agents are, but make that connection. Next up, notarios. Man, very important to start with those guys early in the process. Find the right ones, and you get those from your CIPS friends. CPAs, accountants, very awesome to have those so they can study the numbers and the taxes. Taxes are in my past, they're very important in Mexico, because man, there's all kinds of opportunities. I'm going to call them opportunities. And sometimes those opportunities, if you're not surrounded by the right people watching out for you and your clients, those opportunities are not so much fun. So you got to make sure that your partners that are around you, know the area, have the connections, and are watching out. Okay. And, one of them's title. A lot of times people say, oh, I own this piece of property. And once the research done, maybe not so much. Maybe it's some family members that have passed away that owned it, and one family member's just kind of taken over. Maybe it's a business partner that is split up. So you just got to be super careful to have that clarification. And when you go to purchase a property, what I have found, it's not as restrictive as here, where in the States we have certain forms and it's all written out. We don't write them, they're written by your local associations. Well, in Mexico, everything's a little bit different. You have attorneys writing them up, and you better make sure that attorney knows the area and has experience in, if it's a commercial shopping center, hey, make sure that, they have that, experience. If it's at an industrial place, make sure they have experience there, because there's all kinds of things that we would not really worry about here in the US or be concerned about, but in Mexico, those are some details that you better make sure that that you're following up and having all those nailed down. Because during the inspection time or the due diligence time, there is all kinds of opportunities there, that you're dealing with, that have to go through the government. and, certain restrictions on, how much you can build on there. What are you doing with the water? How are you getting electricity there? All kinds of fun stuff. But, that's what you're doing, often in this time where you're doing your due diligence. Next up, I'd like to go on to Teresa. If you could play that video of the Riviera Maya, that would be great.
Yep. Is this going? Okay, hold on, share. All right, hopefully this is on.
Might have to skip that ad, Teresa.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm Gary Bembridge. This is another.
Oh, that's going the wrong direction. I don't know what happened there.
But I think on the 6th
Hold
best
on.
European river.
Let's go back.
Nobody
So why Riviera Maya
told
is
me
the one
he
we're
was
looking for.
buying a European river cruise
Yes.
instead of his usual ocean cruise. I had to sit him down
Here, let
and
me
run him
start
through
over.
a series of things that had
Sorry.
thrown surprise, and I had really not been ready for.
Here, let me start this over. I'll go back to the. Hold on, I'll get it right back up.
What I'm trying to share with your, Teresa's helping me out because I'm technically challenged. It's really just a cool video on the Riviera Maya. I practice real estate in the Riviera Maya, as well as I do a bunch of stuff in the Baja Peninsula. And this particular video just really shows, all the reasons on why people are purchasing. There it is, right there. We can get to the beginning of that.
And you can hear it okay, yes?
Yes.
Hey guys, volume is too low.
Okay, thanks, Teresa. That video was created by one of the developers that we work with by the name of Simca. They're the largest actual developer in the Riviera Maya, probably for the last 15 years. Not only but in residential, but a ton of commercial opportunities, from industrial stuff into warehouses, into retail, to shopping centers, and a whole bunch of other things. And that video gave you some reasons, why the Riviera Maya. I will tell you, it's become one of the fastest growing areas in the country, and for several reasons. The location's awesome, with great airport that has grown, ×5 over the last 10 years. The economic incentives are awesome there to bring opportunities there. The government's doing a lot of stuff to encourage corporations to come. And just to give you an example, when I moved to Playa del Carmen, there really was only about 30,000 people there Playa wasn't even on the map until early 2000s, and there was really not much there. There was a Sam's there when I moved there, but other than that, there was a McDonald's, a couple other maybe chain restaurants, but not a whole bunch. And just over the last 10 years, now you got Office Depot, you got um, Home Depot, you got Walmart, you got City Club, you got all these corporations from the US that have come into this area because the area has gone from 30, 40,000 in 2010 when I left to probably over 300,000 people that actually live there now. In the Riviera Maya, you have the port in Progreso. So you got the ships coming in, you got for cargo ships at the same time, you got a ton of cruise ships coming in there. The natural resources in the area is strong. The infrastructure, that's important when you look at, foreign countries, because the infrastructure is not always like what we have here in the US with high-speed internet, the most important that we all live by, with now. The Riviera Maya has done a really good job of getting the infrastructure there, and it's not everywhere, but started in Cancun. It's awesome in Cancun. When I was in Playa, you went and bought your internet, you bought a card that lasted 30 days exactly, and it paid like 20 bucks for it, and internet was sketchy. Well, now it's just like you buy here. So the infrastructure is good there. The industrial, opportunities coming into the area are huge. And all of these opportunities are coming to the area because of all the tourists that are coming there and all the people that have made the decision to move there. Okay. Education is growing in the area, and the security and the quality of life in the Riviera Maya / Mexico is amazing. Health insurance for Mexican residents it's so cheap. It's just crazy. So often, Americans are moving there because they need help with their insurance. Okay, it's just a whole bunch cheaper. Medicine. Oh, I can't tell you how cheap it is and how easy it is to get the same stuff we take here in the U.S. At a small cost. So great area to move into. Lots of opportunities. They're building right now. It's it's in the process, I should say. They're building a huge airport in Tulum to help out Cancun's airport because it's gotten so busy. That's going to bring a ton of commercial stuff, into the area when that airport is finished out, and that will take Tulum, that is, I'm going to say probably 60,000 people today. It's going to really explode that city as well. And then the Mayan train, that's another infrastructure that is started. They're starting to clear land. They're starting to move materials and put them in place to start building the Mayan train. And that's going to go from Cancun to Playa to Tulum to Mahawa to Bacalar and all the way around at a super, fast speed. And, here again, I think that's going to increase the opportunities for corporations to go and install, different things there. Lots of hotels coming in. A Nickelodeon just opened up in the area, which, Nickelodeon, for those that have kids, that's going to promote a ton of tourism, to bring families down there. They have the #1 theme park in the world, which most people think that's Disney World, but the world experts on tourism say it's Escarat, which is there close to Tulum. And rumor has it that things have been signed that they're going to actually build Disney World in the area. So when a Disney World comes there as well, wow, it's going to be, we just won't be able to catch up, getting, enough stuff there. And I think, this area is just going to really, really move fast. And with that being said, Baja, Mexico, Los Cabos, all the way up to Todos Santos, to La Paz, to Loreto, up to Tijuana, there's so many opportunities for commercial stuff, in those areas. They when they had the World Summit years ago, they built a beautiful highway that starts in Cabo and goes all the way up to San Diego. So, they are prepared for the future to have a lot of new opportunities go that way too. So with that being said, there aren't any questions that I can help with.
Thank you, Ed. I'm super excited about the transportation to Tulum because when I was there a few years ago, I was there with, my then 6-year-old, and we had to take a taxi all the way from wherever, was it Cancun, right? It was a long, long drive. And it was funny because it was an older car and my son says, "What's that?" And he's pointing to underneath the window. It was a window crank. He had never seen that before. So, because we all have automatic windows here, right? So it'll be nice to have like public transportation that gets you there much more quickly than trying to take a taxi.
Yeah, the highways, in the area have improved a ton over the years, but the train and then the additional airport is just going to make that area explode even more.
It'll be awesome. So we are concluding the presentation portion of this. We are recording this and it should be available through NICAR.com if you want to reference it later. I did ask everyone to put their contact information in the chat in which it could be saved. Feel free to reach out to Ahmed or myself at any point. My name is Teresa Mueller. I will be taking over as chair for our global committee in NICAR. And would love to hear suggestions for future presentations next year. We probably will be taking December off as everyone's usually busy with the holidays, etc. But we will start again with some level of frequency next year. I know people are zoomed out, but we want to deliver quality commercial real estate content around the globe. And it makes sense that a Zoom does continue because sometimes it's not quite easy to fly everyone into one room like it is in San Diego. So I appreciate everyone participating and asking questions. I'm going to end the recording.
Teresa, 1 minute. Just
Uh-huh.
before I do that, thank you very much. Thank you, Ed. Is Antonia still there?
I think he must have dropped off.
Oh, okay. Because I think there were some questions that had come up that were pertaining to some of the legal issues. So Antonia as well, we'll follow up. But thank you very much. And it's all yours.
Okay, I'm